Joining us now, Jack Trammell. Let me tell you a little bit about Jack. He is a professor, a doctor at Randolph-Macon College. He is also one of three candidates running for Congress in the 7th Congressional District. He is the Democrat. Jack, great to have you with us again.
Good morning. How are you?
You know, I love debates, but I really found that debate last night to be wholly uninspiring. And, Jack, there's so many big issues going on today. And, I mean, that was just Enron, Grover, Norco. Jack, before we get into the issues, just to ground me in sanity, let me just ask you straight up. Why does Grover Norquist matter to anybody on the face of the earth?
You've got me on that one. And I would say that sometimes people use the past to hide from the challenges of the present, but, I'm not one of those. I love history. I think it connects up to where we are, but I'm like you. I wasn't making that connection.
Why we were talking about Enron last night when we're about to go to war, just befuddling to me, and it's I think what is really the matter with politics today. 8:42 here on the John Fredericks Show. Now, Jack Trammell just launched a new TV ad. We're going to go right to that.
My name is Jack Trammell. My wife Audrey and I live on this farm here in Louisa County. We raised our 7 children here. I'm a professor at Randolph-Macon College and director of disability services. In rural Virginia, we look out for our neighbors, and that's the kind of responsibility we need in Washington again. David Brat is running to push Congress as far right as he can. I approve this message because I'll work with both parties to do what's right for Virginia.
Okay, Jack, that is in the 7th Congressional District, which is the district that was held by Eric Cantor for some time. There's 3 candidates, yourself, Republican, that beat Cantor, Dave Brat, your colleague at Randolph-Macon, and Michael Carr, the Libertarian. You were the first candidate to go on TV. Why?
Well, I didn't plan to be first, but ever since I got into this race, I got into it to win. And that goes all the way back to when I knew I was running against a very powerful incumbent, Eric Cantor. And I didn't make the decision lightly, but once I made it, I got in the game to win. And so the fact that my TV is up first is more a reflection of the terrific staff I have and the fundraising we've done. And we've put all the spokes on the wheel, so to speak.
Jack Trammell, a Democratic candidate for Congress in the 7th Congressional District of Virginia. Jack, I want to get to the big issues of the day. We had several analysts on Monday, both of them telling us that Baghdad is a week to 10 days from falling to ISIS. Now, Jack, we have about 1,700 troops in there, 2,500 in Kuwait. Are we going to be looking at a Saigon-type evacuation situation? And at what junction do we go to war, commit troops, or just get out? What do we do? Because clearly, Jack, the bombing is not working.
Well, I'm not sure what the solution is, but I'll tell you one thing. I support Senator Kaine and people who think Congress ought to be a big part of the dialogue about what we should be doing. I think during time of crisis and war, there is a great danger of the federal government acting unilaterally. There was a group called the Quids who were Republicans who broke away back in the early 1800s specifically because they thought that war was the greatest threat to liberty and to an unbridled kind of federal power. And, the Quids would be nervous right now looking at what's happening there because we just keep getting into situations that cost us a lot of money, cost lives, and I think I said to you once before, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 3 times. Where are we headed with this? And I think, one of the options is to get out and to reassess where things are.
Jack, that isn't a bad idea because we're involved in something that nobody really understands what victory is. That's not been articulated by this president. So you would think at a minimum we've got to go back. But the problem right now is we're at a junction where we have to do something. We either have to get out or we have to get in. And I don't think, I'm with you 100%, I don't think that can be decided by this president without Congress, right?
I completely agree.
I'm going to stay with international affairs. I want to get to the situation in Turkey. They're a member of NATO. They have the second largest military in NATO to the United States. Basically, they're not doing anything we ask. At what point in time do we go to them and say, you're either going to work with us and get your troops in or just get them out of NATO?
Well, I think this is one of the fundamental challenges, even perhaps a flaw in the policy that we've had internationally in that region the last 20 or 30 years, is that we talk about the work that our partners are doing with us, but closer examination reveals that these partnerships, quote unquote, often have not as much luster and shine to them as we think they do. And once again, I think our default is to say, okay, if they won't do it, we will, but that situation is just not going to work forever.
Would you be in favor of calling Turkey on the mat and saying either you work with us, either you're our ally, or we're going to kick you out of NATO?
Well, we just a moment ago mentioned the role of Congress. Now let's return to the role of the president. And as head of state, you often can leverage with your counterpart in a partner country, and one would hope that those kind of talks would be taking place nonstop until we kind of get the situation more under control.
All right. So, Jack, it sounds like you would be in favor of doing something rather than just sitting on the sidelines as we are right now. Because, look, at the end of the day, there's going to be no troops from anybody else but us. So I'm in agreement with your position. We either have to go to Congress and get authorization to expand the war, or we need to get out. Because I don't see how what we're doing right now makes any sense. If you keep going down the same path, you end up in the same place. Jack, I want to get to the domestic issue. President Obama now in the midterms making one of his arguments for an increase in the minimum wage. Now, you're an academician. I studied economics. If you artificially raise the minimum wage, it often costs people jobs. We're still in a down economy. How do you reconcile that?
Well, the way I would reconcile that is with a very basic cost-benefit analysis. I have seen the evidence that if you raise the minimum wage past a certain threshold, you start to have increasingly detrimental effects on the economy and with job loss. But I also know that it's intolerable for us to have people who are working full-time, who don't have access to basic health care benefits and adequate public transportation. They have no way to raise themselves up. Mm-hmm. And I think we can talk about raising the minimum wage without doing damage to the economy.
Jack, if you were a member of Congress going into 2015, based on Virginia's economy in the Southwest, would you be in favor of reining in President Obama's overreaching EPA? And why? Or why not?
I am in favor of shared responsibility, and I don't like nuclear options like saying there will be no EPA, because frankly the EPA is the only place that's ever come up with an overarching plan to reduce our carbon footprint. But on the other hand, we have an energy industry that we rely on, and we cannot, like I said, use nuclear options. We have to partner. We have to problem solve. We have to work together. We have to think incrementally sometimes rather than in using that scepter to just wave it and change things in one fell swoop. So I think, yes, the EPA needs checks and balances, mm-hmm. and the industry needs the EPA too. We need to have shared responsibility for cheap and affordable energy, but also developing those resources in a way that is mindful of climate change and the other challenges in our environment.
I'm going to go to a question that was asked in Kentucky to the candidate running for U.S. Senate against Mitch McConnell. Did you vote for President Obama in 2008 and 2012?
I did.
How would you grade President Obama's performance from 2008 to now, and why?
Well, As I mentioned when we talked about Eric Holder, I think history will have a different kind of report card because you have time to look back and put things in context. But since we're living in the moment, and I think that's what you're asking about, I think it's a mixed report card. I think we can see successes, we can see courageous decisions, but we can also see where people might question some of the things that have happened. And this initiative by Senator Kaine is an example where I think we need to restore the checks and balances for how we make decisions about war. And so I think, like many presidents, it's a mixed report card.
Right now, other than that one issue, is there one other thing, one other policy, one other thing that President Obama has done that really ticked you off?
Really ticked me off?
Yes.
I can't think of anything that ticked me off. I think of things that I think are courageous, like the Affordable Care Act, but then I think about the complications with them and the things that we need to address with them that have not been solved yet.
Is there another policy of this president that you would have opposed?
That I would have opposed?
Yes.
Well, I am very much leery of these overseas interventions. And so I think I mentioned before that the president is perhaps in a position, no doubt in a position, to know a lot more than I do. But nonetheless, these overseas wars have cost us so much money, and they expand the role of the federal government in our lives in ways that are unintentional, but that ultimately become a problem. And so I think that in terms of our role overseas, that's an area where I think we can do better.
Okay, I've got about 20 seconds, Jack. One more question: up or down? If you were in Congress, you have voted to reauthorize the Patriot Act, yes or no?
As it was proposed, you mean?
Yes, sir.
I would have been disposed to vote against it simply because I believe that the government should not be involved in spying on our own people to the extent that we can avoid that.
Well, on that, we are in total agreement, and that is going to be the final word. If people want more info, Jack, where do they go?
TrammellForCongress.com.